And welcome, Hoosier fans, to this week's edition of Assembly Call Radio, where each week we discuss the most important IU basketball stories from the past 7 days. This is our 70th edition of Assembly Call Radio, and it is our 397th episode overall of the Assembly Call, recorded on the evening of Thursday, April 5th, 2018. I am your host, Jerod Morris. And let's begin this week how we begin every episode of the Assembly Call, and that is with our Hoosier Proud banner moment. And once again, this week's banner moment focuses on an IU basketball team, but not the one that we usually focus on here at the Assembly Call. There is no more appropriate way to begin this week's show than by offering a proud and enthusiastic note of congratulations to the IU women's team who defeated Virginia Tech last Saturday in front of a record home crowd to secure the WNIT championship. It was a triumphant and fitting end to the remarkable careers of Tyra Buss and Amanda Cahill, and yet another reminder of the enduring strength of Hoosier Nation. A banner will undoubtedly be hung from the rafters of Simon Skjodt Assembly Hall to commemorate the achievement, and it should. Championships are always worth honoring, and this group of Hoosiers should forever be remembered as champions. And, you know, ever since I became a dad, I have looked forward to the first time that I get to take my kid to a game at Simon Skjodt Assembly Hall, the place where I grew up going to games with my dad. I've looked forward to telling stories about Calbert Chaney, Greg Graham, and all of the other great players I grew up watching. I've looked forward to explaining the stories behind each banner, describing the iconic greatness of the perfect 32-0 season, and discussing why the impact of Bill Garrett's fantastic career goes so far beyond just the basketball court. You and I both know that the storytelling about IU basketball could go on forever. Passing these stories on from generation to generation is what makes being an IU basketball fan so special, and it's our responsibility. And now, as the father of a spirited, inquisitive, intensely curious 20-month-old daughter, I am so appreciative of the fact that Simon Skjodt Assembly Hall is not just a cathedral where we recognize and celebrate the achievements of men. The name itself, Simon Skjodt, is so because Cindy Simon Skjodt was so inspired by her childhood visits to Assembly Hall with her father that she donated $40 million to the renovation. And clearly, the legend of Tyra Buss and Amanda Cahill will now reverberate throughout the hall and its rafters for decades to come. I didn't have to attend games in which Isaiah Thomas or Steve Alford played to be inspired to run out in my driveway and pretend to be them. I learned their stories, saw their pictures and replays, and I saw myself in them. Now my daughter, whether she grows up wanting to be a renowned philanthropist who is named Woman of the Year or a legendary basketball player who scores more points as a Hoosier than almost anyone, will have stories that she can revel in and examples that she can look up to that are as natural a part of her Indiana basketball experience as highlights of Keith Smart's shot. And this isn't just important for our girls to see, it's important for our boys to see too. What Tyra and Amanda have meant to Indiana basketball and will continue to mean to every kid fortunate enough to go to Simon Skjodt Assembly Hall with their parents goes so far beyond the wins and the points and the rebounds. But sometimes it takes winning a championship to ensure that a legacy always remains front and center and gets the discussion and recognition that it deserves in perpetuity. That is the power of a banner, and the 2018 WNIT championship banner, once it is hung, will be a most worthy and important one. Okay, now let me introduce my esteemed co-host for this week's show. To my left, he is back, one of the world's top 10 bracketologists and the still proud president of the Robert Johnson Fan Club, especially after Robert finally fulfilled our longtime Assembly Call prophecy of hitting an important game-winning shot, which, if you missed it, vaulted the Big Ten 3-on-3 team to a championship during Final Four weekend. Andy, what is your bottoms line this week?
Well, I'm going to struggle to follow up with your eloquence on the IU women's team. So that was certainly one I was going to mention. But the other was that Big Ten 3-on-3 championship. I don't know that you can hang a banner for something like that, but if you could, it would be a fitting legacy to Robert Johnson. So I'm going to start a petition for that as well. Certainly, it falls firmly in line behind the WNIT championship banner you talked about, but the inaugural champions of the 3-on-3 with Robert playing well. I think he closed out 2 or 3 of the games, and so you at one point on Twitter remarked that we'd finally gotten that game winner, and he had a deep 3 to clinch it for them. So it was fun to watch him play. Kind of an interesting event. I found myself okay for the most part rooting with the Big Ten players that everybody had taken on, although I did think some of Nate Mason's general shot selection and decision making on the court was questionable. But be that as it may,
imagine that.
Yeah, crazy to think about, huh? So no, it was like I said, it was a cool event, a good kind of last chance to see him as a representative of IU in that regard, and so cool that they won. So I am currently going through basketball withdrawal at this point with the college season over, and I'm finding that I don't really know what to do with my evenings. I'm not looking at bracketology. There's no tournament games on, so it's a little weird. But luckily, I also have a young daughter whose soccer season starts in earnest this weekend. So I will be finding myself freezing my rear off bright and early on Saturday morning here at a soccer tournament. So I'll do that to get by, but hopefully some good IU basketball news and discussion to keep us going through the what an off season that won't be able to go quite fast enough.
Say hi to Jen. That's what you do. Reintroduce yourself.
Yes. We've definitely probably spent more time together, actually in functional conversation than we had in prior weeks, for sure.
All right. And to my right, we have a man who apparently still has to remind people that he was the only national columnist saying that the Pacers won the Paul George trade. He's a columnist for the Big Lead. And he is someone who, apparently buoyed by the enduring confidence of his Pacers Thunder trade analysis, responded to a recent tweet asking who's the best young sports media mind in the industry right now by saying me, as in him. Apparently, he forgot that late 30s doesn't really qualify as young anymore. He is Ryan Bigger Ragu Phillips. Ryan, what is your rant this week?
What's this late 30s thing? I'm in my mid 30s. I'm just locked in. I'm in my prime. And also maturity matters, right? For this young analyst. I think I'm right there. Honestly, I think my banner moment is the fact that Villanova won the national title. And the reason why is because if you look at the way that team's built, and I wrote about it a little bit this week, that's built the way it looks like Archie Miller's building his team. And that's with 3 and 4 year players, redshirting guys, something that we haven't seen in a long time. You saw Race Thompson redshirt this year. I'm sure that somebody's going to have to redshirt next year because of the overload of players on the roster, all about the same age too. I think that was encouraging to me that look, Villanova had two 5-star guys on their roster, Jalen Brunson and Mari Spellman. But other than that, they had a bunch of 4-star guys, a bunch of overlooked guys, and the backbone of those 2 national titles in 3 years were unheralded recruits who, fit a system and who were brought in not because of their star rankings, but because they were intelligent basketball players who could play in multiple systems, who were versatile, who could all switch and play different positions. That's what this incoming recruiting class looks like from Archie Miller. It's a group of versatile, big guys, and by big, I don't just mean beefy. I mean long, athletic, can play multiple positions, certainly. And that's just the way basketball is moving. Now, look, Villanova shot the ball incredibly well, but they were balanced. They were a team that, top to bottom, those guys could all help each other out on the court, and they bought into a team concept. There was no, guy that they always had to go to. It was a different guy every night. It felt like stepping up and winning. And look, you can go the route of bringing in all the 5-stars in the world, like Kentucky or Duke do, or you can bring in players who fit your system and fit what you're trying to do, and smart players and guys who are willing to sacrifice their own statistics for the team to win. And that's what you have at Villanova. And that's why I think Jay Wright's the best coach in the country right now. And what he's done has been remarkable, considering his recruiting classes have averaged being in about the 30s. He's never had, since 2010, he hasn't had a recruiting class inside the top 20. And he's won 2 national titles, 4 out of the last 5 Big East titles. The only one in that 5-year span he didn't win was this year, and he wound up winning a national title. So I thought that was encouraging for Indiana fans to see the way that Archie Miller is building this team, and to see the way that it had been built by the current national champions. It looks like that's the same road. He's trying to bring guys in who are going to be here for a long time, hopefully, and bring guys in who want to, win at the college level and are willing to buy into the system. So I thought that was really encouraging from an Indiana fan. If you want to look at an encouraging thing from the NCAA tournament, since IU wasn't there, I think that's the encouraging thing for me.
Pretty encouraging. By the way, Brian in our chat reminds me that it's now the Oladipo trade, not the Paul George trade. So, Pacers got the best player. So,
I agree.
Yeah. Okay. So here are the topics and the questions we're going to address this week. We will talk about why it matters that AJ Moye visited with Archie Miller this week. We will discuss the encouraging current status of Indiana's program value and financial health. We might get into the latest on who is coming and going in the Big Ten if we have time, and we will also answer a bunch of really good questions that you all sent in. All of that coming here on Assembly Call Radio. Before we dive into that, a quick suggestion. If you need IU gear, and if you want some of the best officially licensed IU gear that you can find anywhere, whether it's to go out to the BART and watch a baseball game, whether it's to get ready for football season, to support any of the IU teams, then you want to go to the official IU online store. And if you use the URL iustore.shop when you go, it will redirect you to the official online store. And that's actually our affiliate link, so that when you go there and make a purchase, buy a hat, buy a fleece, buy tailgate gear, whatever you buy, we actually get a 10% commission when you make that purchase. So it's a great way to support the Assembly Call, hopefully buying gear that you would buy anyway to support your Hoosiers. So again, the URL is iustore.shop. That will take you to the official IU online store. Anytime that you need to buy IU gear for yourself, for a friend, if you want to start buying Christmas gifts early, whatever you want to do, iustore.shop, and you'll get great IU gear and support the Assembly Call in the process. You are listening to Assembly Call Radio. I am Jerod Morris, here with my usual co-hosts Ryan Phillips and Andy Bottoms. Ryan, you kind of gave us your lingering thoughts from the Final Four. And Andy, I want to give you an opportunity too.
Oh, I got plenty more.
Well, I figure you do. For this spot though, I just any lingering thoughts that we have, because I'll say, I've got some that I want to talk about off the top of the next segment, but I think, just on the heels of our episode last week and watching the Final Four play out, my big takeaways are, number one, be patient with good coaches. It took John Beilein and Jay Wright a little while to get things going. Now they have it going at a really high level, but their fans, their administration had to be patient.
I think there's something to add there too, is that sometimes coaches have bad seasons too. And it's Jay Wright had 2 really bad seasons in a row there 5 years ago, and
that actually made him change how he's recruiting.
Exactly. And so I think you're right with not the quick trigger, but I think that also, even once a guy's been there for a while, give him the benefit of the doubt to fix things. I think that's really important.
Yep. And as you said, earlier, build your program around guys who are going to stay for 3 or 4 years and are totally bought in, while sprinkling in the elite 5 stars where they fit, and then establish a culture of shooting, unselfishness, and defense. And if you build your team on those pillars, you're going to be able to win in the regular season, and you're going to be versatile enough to win in the NCAA tournament too. So those are kind of my lingering thoughts coming out of this. Andy, what are your lingering thoughts as we now move away from the Final Four and start looking ahead to next year?
I mean, they were pretty similar to yours. I think you mentioned that about how Jay Wright kind of changed his recruiting. The latest Mind Your Banners was up today, and I haven't quite finished listening to it, but they had Rob Doster on from NBC, and they were talking a little bit about that and how Wright kind of had built the program through the kind of guys that really bought into what he wanted to do. Then after they had some success and got to the Final Four originally with the Scotty Reynolds group, kind of went away from that a little bit, and eventually, went back to getting obviously good players, but guys who could be successful and fit into what he wanted to do. And I think, that's one of the things we've talked about with so many of the guys that are coming in next year, that they just, kind of fit the mold of what Archie wants. So I think that's, that's a positive and speaks to that. And, I think it was interesting for Michigan to get there. This isn't quite the Michigan team that we've all grown accustomed to. They weren't ever quite as explosive offensively, but really, changed the way they played on the defensive end and were, good enough offensively. So, just kind of shows some of these recipes that you have can be, a little bit different and still be successful. Obviously, there's all the stats around, you got to be a certain place in Ken Pom to be able to, get to the Final Four and things like that. But, I think you've seen, Michigan be able to get there a couple times doing it slightly different ways. And just seeing there's not a recipe to get there. And I think, we talked about this a couple weeks ago of, can you get there playing this system and that system? Yeah, there's some basic things that you have to have, but there isn't a singular recipe of here's how you have to play, here's the tempo you have to play, and all those kinds of things. And so I think as we watch, the IU team evolve, hopefully, their recipe at some point is good enough to make it as well.
Alrighty. Well, there was something that Jalen Brunson said after the game that has really stuck with me since, as it relates to IU basketball. Find out what that was, what it can mean for IU hoops, next here on the Assembly Call. All right, 1512. Hello to everybody watching on YouTube. It's awesome to see so many of you here in the off season. Our off season live viewership is way up this year, which is exciting. I think it shows the confidence level in Archie and the program, despite the subpar results the last couple of years. And I share your
hope is a beautiful thing. It's like why would anybody watch the San Diego Padres right now? Hope, because in the future they might be good.
Ryan, I have a question for you. I think you'll know the answer to this. I'm
ahead.
watching the South Bay Lakers play right now.
Yes.
In whatever. Which Ware twin is on the team?
Travis.
Well, he had about the worst minute and a half of basketball that I think it's possible to have. He fouled a guy on a three, who made the three, by the way. Then while the guy's shooting the free throw, he doesn't block somebody out, gives up a dunk on a putback from that. Goes down the other end. He may not have touched the ball on that end of the floor. Gives up another three on defense the next time. So gave up 8 points in essentially 2 possessions, and then followed that up by turning the ball over. So it was a really, really solid showing from him.
The world is raining crap on Travis Ware.
Yeah,
wow.
Exactly. I'm watching in the hopes that they actually let Thomas Bryant touch the ball at some point, but that has been a rarity in the part that I've watched.
He was a midseason All-Star, so they were feeding him the ball, but I think he's been up with the Lakers for a while, so maybe he's just not in the flow of the offense. But they sent back some guys for the G League Western Conference Finals, and I think he's down there now.
Yeah, he's been playing the whole time I've been watching it, but they Ware's
demand the ball, Thomas. Just go get it.
Ware with another just a horrendous shot. Good Lord, this guy's embarrassing himself. He might be shaving points. It's hard to say.
Well, because one of the Ware twins was like up with the Lakers for a while and actually playing pretty well. So I wonder if they signed his twin. I don't know.
Oh God, nah. Who knows? Who knows? I had no idea the Matt Costello guy that played at Michigan State was in the G League, playing for the Spurs affiliate, of course.
No, it is Travis. David Ware is playing in Osaka, Japan.
Oh boy.
By the way, we have an important question from
the one
coach.
Who's playing is socking on the court. So
we have an important question from Brian Tonsoni in the chat. He wants to know, does flirting with Mrs. Tonsoni via email count for online dating? The eHarmony ad last week got him thinking. I say absolutely yes. That certainly qualifies as online dating. It's a little bit different, but he did what he had to do with the technology that was available to him, and it worked out successfully. So yes, another successful online dating story. By the way, we do have more eHarmony ads coming up, but there was like a weird staggering of their initial order, so we don't have one for them. But still, check out eHarmony. We still support them.
Well, I was going to say, Jerod, yeah, so Skype just closed and didn't say anything. I'm back in the call now, obviously.
I see you. I'll keep my eye on it. If I have to pull the initial audio from Hangout or from Hangouts, I will. It'll be a pain
it was
neck,
weird.
but I'll
it
do
just
it.
Disappeared off my screen.
Yeah, and thanks for letting me know.
Yeah.
That's
I'm glad I noticed. I mean,
I know. Well, that's the one risk that we run doing the show without a producer, because I'm trying to keep a track of the run sheet, and then I don't always look at the audio coming through, so I sometimes don't see it. So always let me know. Okay, cool. Let's hop into this next segment.
Sure.
Should be pretty easy to hop into here. Okay, you guys ready?
Yep.
All right. You are listening to the Assembly Call. I am Jerod Morris here with Ryan Phillips and Andy Bottoms. Don't forget that if you ever have to miss all or part of an episode of Assembly Call Radio, there are 2 great ways to catch up. You can subscribe to our podcast wherever you listen to podcasts. Just search for Assembly Call. Or you can join our live Thursday night broadcast or watch the video replays by subscribing to our YouTube channel at youtube.com/assemblycall. So I mentioned at the end of the first segment that Jalen Brunson said something after the game that has stuck with me. And what he said was, I'm pretty sure he was hugging the trophy as he was saying this, we play for the ones who came before us. They set the tradition. And I was just so impressed by that level of humility in, a moment for him that, where he had to just be so awash in emotion and personal pride and excitement at what they had just achieved. And that what he is thinking about is honoring the Villanova players who came before and the importance of the example that they set, and clearly how committed this Villanova team was to carrying on the tradition and the legacy of the great teams that came before them. And as soon as I heard him say that, I thought about how it's the kind of sentiment that we should be hearing regularly from Indiana players, especially given our history and our tradition. And of course, a big issue with that over the last couple of decades has been an inability to reestablish a continuity of culture since Bob Knight's firing. But I'm hopeful, that Archie Miller and his staff will be able to do that slowly but surely in the ensuing years. And, you saw this week, AJ Moye visited Bloomington. Archie had a really nice tweet about it. And it's great to see former players who don't necessarily have a connection to Archie, but do have a connection to Indiana. And AJ, obviously, a legendary player in the lore of IU basketball for what he did in 2002. It was great to see him back. And Archie and his staff, by all accounts, have been active in reaching out to former players. We saw Calbert Chaney visited at one point last year. So I think as we look forward, and again, as we look for lessons from teams that have been successful this year and the last couple of years that Indiana can apply, and we've talked about this in relation to Michigan State as well, it's really going to be important for Archie to leverage Indiana's tradition, not just to get players to attend Indiana, but to inspire them to be fully bought into the right things when they are here. Because clearly the Villanova guys were that, and it seems like being inspired by the guys who came before was a part of that. And I think this will get easier for Archie as he establishes his own culture and his own cadre of former players, but it can really be accelerated if you get as many of the former players involved as possible, because we just have such a proud tradition to lean on, Andy.
Yeah, it's interesting. I thought back to a show we did, I think it was in the off season, about, who do you want the IU program under Archie Miller to emulate. And I don't know that any of us mentioned Villanova. There was a lot of Michigan State and Kansas, and certainly, those are still fine examples for some of the same reasons that we said with Villanova, just in terms of the passing on of that leadership and the basic principles of the program. But it was an interesting comment to make. And again, that same Mind Your Banners episode, Rob went into some of the other things about Villanova and how simplistic in theory their offense really is and what they do, but just there's some basic principles that they really focus in on, and just kind of it sounds like just basic skills that all their guys end up leaving with in terms of being able to attack a closeout and making making the passes and rotations defensively and things like that, where it doesn't have to be super complicated if you can do the fundamental things really well, as cliche as it sounds, and really instill that from one group of guys to the next. And part of that is having those 3 and 4 year guys and having guys redshirt occasionally and some of those things. But it while it's great and exciting to look at all these programs that sign 5 top recruits, what we look at in the last few years, with a few exceptions, is that teams that are made up, like Villanova has been made up, like North Carolina was last year, even the Gonzaga team that played them in the final last year, those are the kinds of guys that you have that really do that. So I think it's it's kind of a good thing to keep in mind. And if you look 2-3 years down the road and you feel like we're saying the same thing about IU, that what they stand for, what they're going to do night in and night out, that's going to be a huge victory.
Yeah, I think that we have to look at with Villanova's offense was that they were always on the same page. There wasn't a complex theory there. You're right. It wasn't some really detailed, hard to learn system, but they all ran it so well because they were always with each other and they were always on the same page. They knew where each other were going to be. You watch that final. I mean, that was just a clinic. Guys knew when guys were cutting. Guys knew what to look for. They knew when to make the extra pass, when to take the shot. And they never panicked when they got down about 7 in a national title game. I mean, that's the time to panic, is when you're down 7 in a national title game. And they just stayed so calm and just sort of had confidence that somebody was going to step up, make some shots. It was Dante DiVincenzo hit a couple. They kept feeding him. They knew that he had the hot hand. They kept giving him the ball. It wasn't like there was ever a period where they went away from what was working. And then through that, they realized that, if you keep giving him the ball, eventually Michigan's going to have to adjust. And when they did, they found other guys wide open. And it was really, it was clinical. And I think that if you look at Villanova, and you're right, they've had the old guys connect with the program. I do think that, as Andy said, when we were talking about, programs that, to emulate, I think that programs like Kansas and North Carolina and whoever else are programs worth emulating, of course, and they also have that same thing where you'll watch a game and they've got those former players in the stands, always, and that's a big part of the tradition, and it's a big part of, especially if you have NBA guys, even not NBA guys, but you have NBA guys coming back saying, hey, by the way, I made it, you can make it, just buy into what's being sold here. I think that's a big part of any program that wants to be elite. But Andy's right, and I don't say that often, that that the teams with the 5-star, a bunch of one and done guys aren't the ones who won national titles recently, with the exception of the Duke team that beat Wisconsin in the final that was led by Jahlil Okafor. I mean, they had some veteran depth there, but it was largely based on younger guys. And then the Kentucky team with Anthony Davis, that was just that team just had ridiculous talent. It wasn't, there was no secret sauce there other than the fact that Anthony Davis was a once in a generation type guy, and they fed off of him. The rest of the guys played really good defense and hit shots occasionally.
And they still lost in Bloomington.
Yeah, they did. Hey, wait, who'd they lose to? I can't remember. They lost to IU. That's right. Yeah, that's right. First year of the show. But no, I think that you do see that these veteran heavy teams they handle adversity so much better because they're more mature. They've been there. They know what to do. And you saw again last year when that North Carolina team won, that's the team that had lost in the final the year before. And they took those lessons with them. And then this year, Villanova, last year, they lost in the second round in a huge upset. They managed to take those lessons and use them in this tournament. And they knew not to take anybody lightly. They won their games by an average of 17.7 points because they knew never to take their foot off the gas. And they knew that when they got behind to Michigan, that they had the power to come back and beat them. So I really think that there's a lot you can learn from other teams' success or failure in the tournament. And I think that one of the biggest things I took away from Villanova in this tournament was how versatile they were. They could win with defense. They could win with offense. They could win playing fast. They could win playing slow, and how mature they were. And I think that's the goal, is to find a team that can win in various ways with a lot of interchangeable parts, where you're not relying on one guy to do everything, and where they also are just have a maturity to respond to adversity when it happens, because that adversity is going to happen in the season. It's going to happen in a tournament setting. You've just got to know how to deal with it and trust yourself that you can get through it and not panic and not, start blaming each other.
Yep. This is the Assembly Call. I'm Jerod Morris here with Ryan Phillips and Andy Bottom. So let's turn our attention now to some good news, I think, as it pertains to Indiana's present and its future. And a couple of interesting articles came out this week that were related to each other. One is from the Wall Street Journal. They do an annual assessment of the values of college basketball programs. So it's like, you hear about the values of professional sports franchises, how much they sell for. This article operates under the premise of, if college basketball programs could be purchased on the open market, how much would they go for? Okay. And so when you look at the numbers for this year, Indiana's overall program value actually reached its peak in 2016 at $277 million. But then it fell to $243 million this year. However, Indiana actually rose from number 3 in the country to number 2 in the country as Louisville dropped down to 3rd. Clearly, their scandals, I'm sure, hurt that program value. And then Kentucky maintained its hold on number 1. But the bottom line is, according to an objective analysis from the Wall Street Journal, Indiana is the second most valuable basketball program in the country. And part of the assessment is, expectation of the future, how things look in the future. Now, related to that was a great article in the Indianapolis Star written by Zach Osterman. He had a chance to talk with Fred Glass about Indiana's financial commitment to basketball. And I thought Fred had a couple of really interesting quotes. He said, "I'm unapologetic in terms of my ambition for Indiana University basketball, and I'm willing to put my money where my mouth is." He said, "We measure ourselves against the 3 or 4 teams in the country that are widely viewed as basketball royalty. Our program doesn't want for anything." So, look, clearly the results have not been there in recent years for Indiana to be in the same discussion as the blue blood programs. But what we've talked about for the last several years is how the infrastructure of the program is still strong. The fan base is there. The support is there. The tradition is there. The money is there. The resources are there. The facilities are now there. It just takes the right coach and obviously the right consistent collection of players to start winning on a at a big level again. But all of the other signs look good. And just a couple of notes for how Indiana compares to the rest of the Big Ten. Indiana generated more revenue than any other Big Ten school, followed by Wisconsin and Michigan State. Purdue was actually less than half of the revenue that Indiana generated. And Indiana also spent more than everyone other than Michigan State. And they brought in an $11.5 million profit, the basketball program. So things looking up in terms of all the infrastructure and the things surrounding the program. If Archie Miller truly is the right coach, there's really no reason why Indiana can't then regain its blue blood status in terms of actual wins and losses throughout the season and in March, which is the one very important piece that's been missing lately, Ryan.
Hey, Jerod, I got a question for you real quick. Is there enough money earned from the profits and in the budget for a new arena?
Why would anybody want a new arena? We have a legendary cathedral that is a beautiful place to watch basketball.
I'm asking a question. You tossed it to me, and I'm asking a question. I'm just wondering.
Yeah, we know it's a loaded question. We all know your thoughts on Simon Scott Assembly Hall. This is not the time nor the place.
I have no idea what you're talking about.
Andy, why don't you say something meaningful?
Well, I was surprised in the notes you wrote recruiting budget second only to Nebraska. I was like, wait, what?
Yeah, Nebraska had the biggest recruiting budget.
They probably have to fly the furthest, and that's probably why.
Yeah.
Yes. I don't know. That's odd. No, I'll be curious to see how that changes over time, in particular the revenue. I think you had, I'm sure history would show you have a new coach, you get kind of this spike of enthusiasm and excitement about what's new and kind of how that has ebbed and flowed over the prior regime. And then, obviously this year you got that bump. So I think if they can sustain those kinds of, profitability type numbers, it would be certainly a testament to what Archie would build. But I think interesting to see, how that might dip next year, even if the season is relatively successful, how much of that bump is just excitement over a new coach. But yeah, I mean, Glass made that clear when he was, doing the hire that where he viewed the program and, the kinds of numbers in these articles really back that up with the backing that they really have and how much resource they're putting toward making the program what people want it to be.
This is a double check plus level program. There's no question about it. Ryan, do you have anything useful to say, or should we just move on?
No, I'm not
going to let you disparage.
We have a lot of money in the budget. I'm just wondering, what we can buy with that. What cool stuff, what fancy new shiny toy we can buy with that. I mean,
they should invest in the post-game show. That's what they should do.
Well, but then we'd be affiliated with the school,
and then that's where he might have been going initially. That he was trying to parlay some kind of financial windfall, but apparently he had other ideas.
I don't want to be associated with the school. I want to have I learned that. I learned my lesson. I learned that at the Indiana Daily Student, we wanted to be separate from the school, so we were free to criticize.
No, it's true. It is very true. Okay, let's move on here. And coming up, we are going to take a look around the Big Ten as a number of key players have announced their NBA intentions. What does the conference landscape for next season look like right now? Stick with us. We're talking about that next. All right, that was 14:30.
Am I getting ripped in the chat for for my stance on Assembly Hall?
Someone said scold Ryan for wanting a new arena. Assembly Hall is like Fenway and Wrigley, which
you mean a horrible place to watch a game in?
Actually,
don't just give him more ammunition as you.
No, you know what's great about that is it's our argument and Ryan's argument all rolled into one.
Yeah, you're arguing my same thing,
but there's also arguing ours. So
yeah, exactly.
Oh man. Okay, so we were at about 29 minutes. We've got about 20 minutes for these next two segments. I'm thinking, Andy, maybe we keep this one around 7-8 minutes, and then because we have some good questions, so we can we can go about.
You guys just want to focus on this then, because I don't really know what's going around the Big Ten. I've had my head in the tournament, not this stuff. So,
and unfortunately, there weren't enough teams in the Big Ten for you having your head in the tournament to give you a great
pretty much. I mean, yeah. I mean, why don't you guys do it, and I'll comment as I see things going.
Yeah, Andy's done the research on this one, so
let me fill up my water too.
Yeah, I'll just do a quick run through, and then we'll get to some of these questions because I like a lot of the questions that we got this week.
Okay.
Okay. I'm never, I should have screened what Ryan was going to say for that last segment.
Yeah. It seemed like there were a lot of different avenues that could have gone.
Yeah.
But that was where he chose to take it. So what are you going to do?
Yeah. Let's I would start the recording, but I don't want him to just like sit back down and then just blurt into the microphone that he used the restroom or something.
Yeah.
You
just never know.
As he will sometimes do.
You just never know.
You just never know. Do you do any off-season bracketology? Or are you going to?
No, I don't. I have no intention to. I saw that Lenardi put something out. I was like, I just don't even know how or I don't know.
Page views, man.
I guess.
Hey, so I got to tell you guys a story before we go on to this next segment.
This is why we didn't start the segment. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah. So, I mean, I would have told you it after anyway, but
this would have, but you wouldn't have known that we were recording, and you would have just sat down and done exactly what you just did. So,
well, I heard you guys talking.
What would we have been doing if we were recording?
Well, no, you weren't talking in your radio voices. So, my sister, for those on the YouTube channel who don't know, my sister, brother-in-law, and their 4 kids. Who one of them's 8. They have 3.5-year-old boy-girl twins and a 1.5-year-old. They came over to my apartment complex. My apartment complex has a bowling alley in it. And so today they were like, hey, can we come over and just go bowling and just burn the kids out? We'll bring food. I was like, yeah, sure, whatever. It was a friggin' disaster. Like that many kids around is just, if any of you have that many kids, I don't know how you do it or how you're still alive. So they bring food from this really nice fried chicken restaurant in San Diego. It's really famous, called the Crack Shack. It's really good. And they bring food and they set it down. None of the food ends up in the kids' stomachs. It's all over the entire, and this is a really nice, like appointed, laid out, like recreation area. The food ends up everywhere. We're like chasing them around, trying to get them to go bowl. Then they finally start going bowling. And my sister and I walk out to start cleaning all this crap up. And one of the like leasing managers walks by and goes, oh, hey, what apartment are you in? And I told him my apartment number. He's like, okay. And like walks away. I swear to God, I thought he was going to revoke my lease. Like it was that bad. And they're, just screaming and running around in circles. And, it was just like, oh my God, it was, I was there for 90 minutes with them. And it felt like I had been awake for 3.5 weeks. Like it was awful. It was the worst thing I've ever done in my life. I love those kids so much. They're so much fun. But my God, I'm so glad I'm not a parent. That's all. So hats off to you guys who are all parents who have to deal with this stuff all the time. I, on the other hand, not built for it, I don't think. I think I've made my decision, scheduling the vasectomy for next week.
I think you should start a YouTube channel called The Parenting Misadventures of Uncle Rai Rai and just, take video of all these crazy
and then they were like, and then
after,
like they're staying with my parents and the kids were all like, I'm like, all right, guys, I'll try and
as you soon will be once you're
exactly once my lease is canceled. So I'm waiting for the knock on the door right now, Mr. Phillips. We have some bad news. So I went up to they're staying at my parents' place, and I was like, I may stop by tonight. I'm working. I have to do the radio show, and my 3.5-year-old nephew looks at me and goes, "You're not coming by tonight?" And I'm like, "Sonny,
that's how they get
the way you behaved all day." No, probably not. But I will be going over there after the show's over. So.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that's why you're filibustering.
Oh God, yeah. I got energy.
All right, we're gonna cut off your next.
Yeah, all you parents out there, hats off to you. You guys are amazing. I don't know how you do it.
Thank you.
Yeah, whenever my 10-year-old asks me a question where somebody's talking about something, she's like, "Oh, I'm tired." And she'll be like, "Are you tired, Dad?" And I go, "I've been tired for 10 years."
I won't be sleeping for another 8.
Yeah,
exactly.
It's a good answer. That is a good answer. All right, let's hop in and let's talk about the Big Ten. I'll do the intro and kick it to you, Andy.
All right, that's fine.
Here we go. You are listening to the Assembly Call. Go to assemblycall.com/join right now, or as soon as it's convenient for you, to learn how to subscribe to our email newsletter. If you want to get more out of being an IU basketball fan, then you need to be on our newsletter list. You will get our weekly 6-Banner Sunday news roundups all throughout the offseason to keep you up to date on what's going on with IU basketball. And then when the season starts again, you will get our post-game analysis emails that we only send to our newsletter subscribers. We don't publish that on our website. It is all free, and it will make you a smarter IU basketball fan. Again, the URL is assemblycall.com/join. I'm Jerod Morris. I'm here with Ryan Phillips and Andy Bottoms. And Andy, let's spend a few minutes just talking about kind of some of the comings and goings with the Big Ten, or at least some of the projected comings and goings with guys who have, announced their NBA intentions. Some guys, saying that they're going to hire an agent and stick in the draft. Other guys, we don't know. Juwan Morgan, as of yet, at least as of Thursday night, hadn't announced anything. And we don't want to spend too much time on this because there's still so much up in the air. And obviously, all of the rosters are going to change so much between now and when the season begins. But we can at least get a look at some of the top level talent in the conference from this year, what they're thinking about for next season.
Yeah, it's so I've looked at, as much as I would say like, oh, these early top 25s are dumb, I managed to compile 17 of them and see where teams rank out. So I guess I'm part of the problem. But if you really look across those, Michigan State, Michigan, and Maryland are the ones that showed up most often. And I think, Michigan State, I don't think that's surprising. Obviously, they lose Bridges and Jaren Jackson, have a fairly good recruiting class, and we'll have, Winston and Langford back. Nick Ward, I think, has put his name in, but I think most people would expect him not to go. So, I think they're on reputation to a certain extent, right around, the 10 to 12 mark. Michigan, Wagner is really the big decision left to be made there. I think if he's back, they're a top 10 team. If he's not, I could still see them in the top 25. They've still got Matthews back, Xavier Simpson, Poole and Livers were young guys this year that will get to play more. And they've got one of the better recruiting classes in the Big Ten, not necessarily a super, high end guy in the mix, but, a handful of good players. And they're certainly at a point where you can't really count them out.
John Maryland, man.
Yeah.
He's good.
Maryland is the one that I thought was interesting. Justin Jackson, kind of a weird decision to go pro in my eyes. They've got a mix of, Cowan and Herder, assuming their back will be juniors. Morcell and Bruno Fernando, I thought had some good moments as freshmen this year. And then they've got two top 50 recruits. At least I looked at the 24/7 composites. So they've got a couple top 50 guys. Feels like a similar formula to what we've seen from them before, but you got a lot of guys back from a team that didn't really do all that well this year. So interesting to me, they got so much love. And the other ones, Nebraska, Wisconsin, Penn State, Purdue, Nebraska, Copeland and James Palmer both have their name in the draft. If they would both stay in, I think they take a huge hit. They don't really have anybody great coming in. Glenn Watson will be back. Roby is an intriguing guy. But they need those guys to come back to be able to really reach that. Wisconsin, I think Happ has his name in, but it is unlikely to hire an agent. Although, the traveling rules in the NBA being what they are, feels like a perfect fit, but what can you do? And they really would have pretty much everybody back. They're really young this year, had some injuries, be a good test for Greg Gard to see what he does there. And, Penn State obviously takes a huge hit with Tony Carr going in the draft. You kind of think, oh, maybe this is the year Penn State can kind of put it together. They played well, won the NIT. The loss of him certainly is huge. And even though they'd have Stevens and Reeves back, presumably, as well as Mike Watkins, who becomes the go-to scorer of those guys is what you had. And then, Purdue's the other one that you've seen mentioned up there quite a bit. Carson Edwards, I think, will probably put his name in. Most people would expect him to come back. He'll have Harms as a sophomore. They've kind of started to build some of that program, but I think inevitably they'll take a dip. They got a grad transfer from Dartmouth, I want to say.
Yeah.
Who had good stats in the Ivy League, so we'll see. But those seem to be the big ones. I think those teams comprise the Tom Dienert of the Big Ten Network put out a early projection. So those were the 7 teams in front of IU. He had IU kind of right in the middle as 8th, and obviously Romeo could swing that quite a bit one way or the other. But some interesting decisions for sure with the guys who still have their names in the draft. I think will go a long way toward deciding, which is in a certain way why it's hard to discuss some of this now. Corey Sanders is going to go pro, so unfortunately that decision came about 2 months too late. Maybe he could have already went ahead and got a jump start on that earlier.
Well, yeah, I mean, buoyed by the way he played against Indiana. He looked like an NBA All-Star in that game.
Yeah, exactly. So,
okay, so let me ask you this, Andy. I mean, we know the Big Ten wasn't that good this year. It was a storyline throughout the season. Then the Big Ten only got 4 teams in the tournament, although they did pretty well in the tournament. Penn State, obviously won the NIT. So, the Big Ten did a nice job in postseason, but now you look at it and, Bridges is leaving and Jaren Jackson is leaving and, Purdue's most experienced players and really good players are leaving. Tony Carr, a lot of really top end talent is leaving. And, while certainly there's some good recruits coming in, I think there was only one currently committed Big Ten player at the McDonald's All-American game. Wiley, I believe is his name, who's going to Maryland. Hopefully there's a second in Romeo Langford coming to Indiana, but we have to wait and see on that. Do you see an opportunity for the Big Ten to be better next year, or is this going to be yet another year of the Big Ten, still being a power conference, but falling well below, some of the other conferences in terms of just, overall talent in the league?
It'll be interesting. I think Jalen Smith is the guy that's going to Maryland, was the McDonald's All-American. He's
Jalen Smith, that's right,
22nd ranked in the 24/7 numbers that I looked at. I think you've got a chance to have, the middle of the league maybe be a little bit better and a little bit stronger, but I think certainly the top end, assuming that Wagner doesn't come back, which I think is a reasonable assumption at this point. He
was very close to staying into the draft last year. So
yeah, that was my thought. I mean, he was one that was there. So I think if he's back, Michigan could be among the more elite teams there if they can build on what they did defensively, and had some promising young guys. Otherwise, I struggle with it. I don't know. Michigan State, you lose Bridges and Jaren Jackson. Are they really? Is it conceivable that they'd be better? It seems hard to believe. And then after that, I don't think any, no matter which order you'd put Nebraska, Maryland, Wisconsin, Penn State, Purdue, none of those teams are going to be, top 10 caliber teams. So I think Michigan and Michigan State really are the ones that may, have to carry that mantle. But I think it becomes a little bit hard. I do think there might not be as big of a drop off from the top of the league. So you kind of had those top four this year, then a pretty big drop off, not necessarily from a record standpoint, but just from an overall resume and talent standpoint. So I think that middle becomes a little bit stronger, but it's hard to tell yourself a story where you've got more top end teams than what you had this year, where you had that many teams on the top handful of seed lines had a Final Four team. That feels like a stretch to me, with Michigan being the potential exception if he decides to come back to school.
Yep. Okay, coming up in our final segment, you guys sent in a bunch of great questions, so we saved some extra time. We will get to all of those questions next, including who we consider the best coaches now without a title. We'll talk about that. All right. 8-10 for that one. Good job on that, Andy.
Thanks. Hopefully I didn't get too far into the weeds.
Ryan, I see that you've got everybody with their pitchforks out here in the YouTube chat.
Yeah, that's what I do.
I mean, you're definitely right. Everybody in here is right. I just like to give you a hard time about this. And I'm very sentimental, so I would hope that any type of new arena could...
Of course. Look at the way they did the renovation. They incorporated so much old stuff into it. They would definitely do that. I know it's not going to happen within the next 6 years, 7 years after the renovation. But you know what? If Louisville can have a new one, if Michigan State can have a newish one, if Maryland can have a newish one, why not Indiana?
Indiana. It's Indiana.
Exactly.
Some would say.
But it's funny, I do get upset at kids not showing up to games, but I can't blame anybody for not sitting in the damn balcony. I really can't. It's a terrible place to watch a basketball game. It's better. I'd much rather, if I had tickets in the balcony, not when I'm a student, but just as let's say I got tickets and I'd be like, no, it's cool. I'll go to Knicks and watch it there. That would be a better it wouldn't be a better atmosphere, but it would be a better view of the game. I mean,
Ryan, true or false? Assembly Hall was modeled in part off of a cattle auction arena.
I think that's false, but only because I know for a fact it was modeled after Memorial Stadium, which is the dumbest way to model something ever.
Well,
yeah, let's model.
Chris from IU Artifacts just mentioned that in the YouTube chat. It's a very odd fact. So in part, apparently there was football stadium and cattle auction arena that all went into creating this great cathedral of college
I honestly
basketball.
thought that was a joke, and you were just joking around.
That would be oddly specific for me to just come up with.
I know. Look, you're a strange guy, Jerod. I was. But no, the whole thing where the walls raised in the corners for absolutely no reason is Memorial Stadium, and how that the ends are all closed in instead of having seats there. That's the way Memorial Stadium used to be. Memorial Stadium got it right and enclosed the ends, but apparently the way they built the basketball arena, that'll never happen because it can't. it'd be structurally unsound to take those walls out. So we dug into that my senior year at the old Indiana Daily Student, and they told us it was impossible to do.
Oh.
And by the way, the top looks like an upside down like Viking ship or something. It's insane.
Yeah.
Yep. Sorry, that's enough of ranting about the arena. I know people are so close to it. Nah. It's just a building, folks. It's just a building.
Says the guy from San Diego.
Yeah, and who would kill anybody if they ever tore down Petco Park. So.
Okay, we got about 12 minutes here, so let's dive into some of these questions. Yeah, this should be fun. You ready?
Yeah.
Yep.
I'll put some notes in the chat as we get closer to the time.
Okay.
Here we go. You are listening to the Assembly Call. I'm Jerod Morris here with Andy Bottoms and Ryan Phillips, wrapping up another week of talking IU basketball here on Assembly Call Radio. We got a bunch of good questions from you all this week, submitted both on Twitter and in our private Slack community. By the way, if you want to be part of that Slack community, it's great IU basketball chat. Just shoot me an email, Jerod@assemblycall.com, and I'll be happy to add you to that. But let's start going down some of these questions. The first one is from Rob, and he says, if Romeo commits to IU, how well do you think Archie's personality and Romeo's personality would match? My initial take is that they don't really seem to have the same personality types at all. Ryan, I'll be interested to get your thoughts on this. We've talked a lot about how it feels like Archie and Rob Finney, are a really great match. No nonsense types of guys, just basketball junkie types. It really seems like they would click. And what I think Rob is hinting at is that Archie is very intense, very demonstrative, whereas Romeo, a bit more laconic, a bit more laid back, doesn't show a lot of emotion on the court. But I think you make a mistake judging a guy's passion to win and competitiveness just by how demonstrative he is after a dunk. And I think for Romeo to be as good a player as he is, there's got to be an intensity and kind of a burning desire deep down. And nothing that I've heard from anybody who's watched him has suggested otherwise. So I don't get the sense that their personalities wouldn't match. But, again, that's without knowing either one of them personally and being there in practices and that kind of stuff. It's a little bit hard to gauge, but I don't get that same sense. Ryan, do you?
No, not at all. I think, and also, guys don't have to have the same personality to get along. I mean, the saying is opposites attract. I mean, I get
that's why this show works.
Yeah, we can't stand each other. By all rights, we would not be able to stand each other. And sometimes we can't stand each other. But no, I think that it's I don't think that's fair to say at all. I think that there is a way that, if you watch Romeo consistently, I think that he and Archie probably will get along really well as far as stuff goes on the court. Archie wants a guy like Romeo who would be willing to attack too. And I think that he'd be willing to, help set things up to make it so Romeo is very successful in college. I don't think there's going to be any clashes between these two if they do, if there is a marriage there.
And as Brian mentions in the chat, he played for Coach Jim Shannon, who Coach Don Sonny coached with, and he's a tough-minded coach like Archie. So, he's been, coach tough like he will be at Indiana. So I don't think that should be an issue.
And that might be what a guy like him needs. If he is a little more laid back, you need the guy constantly pushing you, and that's not a bad thing.
Yeah, I think just based on how they've handled the recruitment, I think they seem to value the, kind of straight shooting, tell it like it is, not sugarcoating anything approach that Archie would seem to have. So yeah, it seems like it would be okay in my
they've endlessly talked about how great Archie has done throughout this process. So even if you don't wind up with Romeo, you have to feel pretty good at the way he approached it, coming in late especially.
Yep. All right, from East Coast Hoosier, who do you guys consider the best coaches without a title? Obviously, Archie Miller has to be on that list. But the five that I listed out, just kind of off the top of my head, Mark Few, John Beilein, Tony Bennett, Sean Miller, Bob Huggins. Andy, am I missing anybody obvious off of that list? Other than Archie, obviously.
Yeah, those feel like the most obvious ones to me. I think they're all kind of interesting in their own right. I guess it depends what you consider, best coach. If you're talking like, best X's and O's type guy, you feel like Beilein kind of floats to the top of that. Mark Few's an interesting one though, just in terms of the success he's had. And kind of how he's viewed. But yeah, those would be a pretty good list. I didn't go through and try to put together more, but those seem like good ones to me.
Guys, I'd add to the list Chris Mack, obviously, if you're looking at today, who's a great coach, not necessarily throughout their career. I think Chris Mack is a guy who you could see winning a national title at some point. Mick Cronin, though, I think he's going to need to go to another program. I think Mike Bray is a great coach, again, at a program that doesn't lend itself to necessarily making Final Fours consistently, so he gets overlooked. But I think he's a fantastic coach, especially an X's and O's guy who is really good at designing individual winning plays. I've seen that in person a lot. He's a guy who you're rooting for the other team, and he'll figure it out and get you on the last play with an inbounds play or something. But I would agree that I think Mark Few is certainly up there. John Beilein is a great call. I think he's developed into one. The thing I like about John Beilein is he's gotten better, I think, as a coach, and he's not a young guy, and he's improved considerably over the last few years. I don't know if Tony Bennett's there yet. I think, again, he's in that Chris Mack thing where if you're talking about today, yeah, certainly he deserves to be on that list. If you're talking about over the last 15 years or something like that, some other guys probably deserve to go ahead of him. But
like Steve Alford, maybe?
Right. No, if this time last year, if you listen to a portion of the IU fan base, Steve Alford should definitely be on the list.
Chum in the water.
How did he do this year, by the way? I'm curious. Sean Miller, Bob Huggins, both great picks as well, as long as Sean is actually clean, which we don't know yet. But I think that you could.
Is that a sweat joke, or is that a
that's an NCAA recruiting joke. Sweat isn't necessarily dirty. It's so
just double checking.
Yeah, and then Bob Huggins, he's like a cockroach that won't die, man. That guy. And I don't mean that necessarily in a negative context. He just every.
I don't
year,
know why anyone would take that wrong.
Yeah, I don't know why.
There's no need to qualify that.
Annoying insect, but no. Every year he seems to produce another competitive team and gets them to play really well. So I agree. I think that's a pretty solid list.
And definitely everybody's answer for the number one coach that you'd want to have a beer with. Is there anybody above Bob Huggins on that list?
I don't know, because I don't think Huggins is having one beer. I think he's gonna I think he's gonna drink you under the table
to have several with.
Yeah.
Okay, moving on to the next question. This is from Jeff. In honor of transfer season, what transfer, early departure in recent years or the past do you think would have made the largest impact at IU had they stayed for their full 4 years? So let me give you a couple that I thought of immediately when I saw this question. Number one is Maurice Creek. If you put him on the 2014 team, given what he did in 2014 for George Washington, where he shot 40% from downtown, that would have been a huge addition to an IU team that was 158th in effective field goal percentage. And if you think back to that 2014 season and just how painful it was offensively, you add Maurice Creek, playing some of those minutes that that Evan Gordon got, you're much better offensively. And then think about if Remy Abel had stayed and he was on the 2014 and 2015 teams, there's another career 40% shooter. And so when you think about that 2014 team with a backcourt of Yogi, Maurice Creek, and Remy Abel, with Mo and Remy both being upperclassmen, I think things are a lot different for that team, and maybe things are different for Tom Crean overall. Who knows? But that revolving door that he had was certainly, a problem that plagued him throughout. And then, if you have Remy Abel in 2015, I would have to think that the defense would have improved as well. That team is ranked 200th on defense. And then the other one that I thought of, Ryan and Andy, was Luke Fisher, who would have been a huge help in 2015 when guys like Colin Hartman and Stan Robinson were getting runs at center. But then if he had stayed, does Indiana get Thomas Bryant and Max Bielfeldt for 2016? Because I think both of those guys were better fits for what Indiana wanted to do, especially that season, than Fisher would have been, who wasn't a three-point shooter. So it would have helped one season, but could it have blocked one of those guys coming in 2016? Who knows? But those were the guys that jumped off to me when I first read that question. Andy, who else came to your mind?
Yeah, the Creek one is interesting. The hard part with him was he would, to me, be the easy answer if not for the injuries. We kind of talk about that with the whole, what ifs and different things like that. But even with, the stats you cited were basically, kind of what he was after the injuries when he was at George Washington. So I thought those were interesting. The other couple that you didn't mention, and obviously these two are are forever connected with IU would have been Emmett Holt and Devin Davis. Both those guys have gone on to play well and play good roles as, kind of undersized, post guys at Houston and at Providence. And so maybe, I guess, even if you spin forward to this year, if, they would have still been there, it would have given another, experienced body that could really do some things. I think Holt really played well for a fairly unheralded guy in his, early in his career. And we had started to spin forward of like, what can this guy be as a 4-year guy and things like that. So those are a couple other interesting ones. The Creek one is probably, of what you said, the one that would be, most interesting watching him in the Crean system for that period of time.
We left out Stan. I mean, it would have been nice, but I don't think Stan would have had the impact of any of those guys. But we gotta just give a hat tip to Stan.
I think Evan Holt, huge one for Indiana because they really needed him that year. I think to have a guy behind Thomas Bryant, as another forward, so or slash center. But yeah, I thought that he was the biggest loss in there. Luke Fisher was a big loss. He didn't, he went on and had an okay career at Marquette, but you felt like he was, I felt like he was a much better fit for Tom Crean's system than he was at Marquette.
By the way, our conversation about having a beer with Bob Huggins has inspired a really funny little sequence of events here in the chat in which Brian Tonsoni is fantasizing about having pizza with Rick Majerus. And you can just imagine where that conversation has gone. So that's the reason to listen to the show live and follow along with the YouTube chat. Okay, the last question that we will address here. This is from Trey. More important for IU to pick up another guard or another big before next season, Andy?
I would say guard for sure. I mean, that's just where the roster is thinnest right now, where there's the least experience. So, need shooting and just more depth in that position. So that was a relatively easy one for me.
Guard, no question.
Yeah, I think it's a guard too. I think it's interesting. I think when I hear people talk about next season, it sounds like a lot of people are banking on Deron Davis, coming back and playing a lot of minutes. And I just say we've got to be cautious with our expectations there because he's coming off an Achilles injury. So we don't know, how quickly he's going to be ready to come back and kind of be the guy that we saw before the injury. But I think same thing. I mean, there's such a glaring need at guard with only 3 guards even on the roster right now that Indiana has got to add more in the backcourt. All right. That will do it for us on this week's episode of the Assembly Call. If you want to see us do the show live and be part of the live chat, join us at assemblycall.com on Thursday nights for the live broadcast of our Assembly Call radio recording. Or you can always subscribe to our podcast by searching for Assembly Call wherever you listen to podcasts. And don't forget to go to assemblycall.com/join to join our free email newsletter. Thank you for listening. We will be back to talk IU hoops again with you next week. Until then, keep your elbows in and your eyes on the rim. And go Hoosiers. All right. I want in on this pizza with Rick Majerus thing, by the way, Brian and Jen.
I wonder if is Ryan Taylor on IU's? Are they going to go after him?
I think
yes.
I think that he's heard from them. I believe.
I think, at least from what I've heard and read, that one's probably it'll depend on what Romeo does. Like, I don't know that he wants to come if Romeo comes.
Okay.
Because they play the same position. So
I think Archie could find room for both.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I was just wondering if that had been released that IU was interested.
Yeah, that's, I want to address all that in some show, but right now, like, we don't really know anything definitive about any of the grad transfer guys. So it feels like a waste of time to analyze them too much without.
Yeah, no, I agree. You have to wait until there's movement.
Yeah. UCLA is looking at Taylor too. So, I mean, if he wants to play for a great coach, clearly he goes out west and
good stuff.
I had somebody on, I think it was Twitter, it might have been Facebook, say to me that, well, yeah, of course they didn't play very well. UCLA didn't play very well. They lost like 3 of their best players, to that incident in China. I was like, whose fault is that? Like, I mean,
I'm not even sure that that's an accurate statement either.
No, it's not. It wasn't
what
at all.
Was expected of those guys, but
no, it wasn't at all. But like that's what he said. And I was, first of all, isn't it the coaching staff's like job to make sure their kids aren't doing stupid stuff? Like, I don't know.
Kind of like it's parents and the uncle's job to make sure that 4 kids don't leave fried chicken laying around at a public establishment.
I cleaned up every single crumb of that stuff, and it took me like a half hour. So you can't blame me for that. It's not my fault if they fling it across the room.
I would argue that Travis Ware's performance in this G League game I watched is as big an indictment of Steve Alford as anything. Good Lord.
Is it on NBA?
It's over now. He was an abomination. He's either hurt, terrible, or shaving points. There are no other alternatives for what could have happened.
Could be all three. We don't know.
We cannot rule that out.
What was final score?
I think they lost by like 13 or something like that.
Damn it.
So
there's a note in the chat. It says, "Man, you guys joke, but I talk to people down in Bloomington. There's still a lot of angry people about not hiring Alford. Can't believe
I know. Oh, I know. I hear from them all the time. Like and he's He's objectively terrible. He had a national championship roster last year with a once in a generation college guard in Lonzo Ball. And where'd they finish? The Steve 16 as always.
The Steve 16. Well, you've got a certain radio host in Indianapolis pumping Indiana fans full of the idea that Steve Alford is a great coach. So
yeah, because he's his friend.
Yeah.
Anyway,
I don't know who that would be.
Good times.
Yeah, good times. Okay, gentlemen, this was fun.
You mean the guy who's a big fan of the show?
Yeah, huge fan of the show.
Fan of the show.
That's the one.
Huge fan of the show.
Huge.
Ryan, you're off next week.
Yes.
Okay, Andy, you're here.
I should be. I don't think I have anything going on.
I will be at Petco Park. You can check my Twitter feed for pictures.
Oh boy,
very nice.
They're terrible, but that place is fun.
Very nice. Okay, let's close up. Thank you all for being here.
Sounds good.
Awesome to see you. We will be back next week, same time, same place.
All right, later, guys.
All right, sounds good. See you later.